You are now watching the Neuroengineering Podcast for Leaders with Velindaba, the neuroengineer, where we have interesting conversations with thought leaders, transforming leaders from leadership darkness to leadership light. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this episode.
Hi, welcome and thank you for joining us in this latest episode of the Neuroengineering Podcast for Leaders. This is where we talk about transforming leaders from leadership darkness to leadership light, using the latest neuroscience discoveries to help explain and make sense of the human behavior. And I'm just so passionate about this because, whenever we host some guests and we host some people that will come and share, their perspectives on what leadership is about, as well as how do we then show up on a day-to-day basis. And today, I'm just so excited. I'm joined by a very good friend of mine. We have shared some platforms at conferences and in different spaces. And I'm joined today by Dr. Robyn Wittaker, who's going to be talking to us about her background and what excites her and what is actually happening in her world. And this is really exciting me, and I'm sure you're going to love it as well. Dr. Wittaker, hello.
Hello, Veli. It's so good to be here with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so very much. And I know this is something that has been coming. Mm-hmm. And things happen. We spoke about this last year already. And things were happening, and I'm just so happy that finally we're here. Thank you so very kindly for gracing us with your presence.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And I just see you're a medical doctor by training.
Yep.
By profession. And you've done a number of things. And I'm very passionate about that. And right now you are you're actually a co-founder and an executive director at Africa Voices Dialogue. And I just wanted to hear something about that. It's quite exciting, and I saw something that you practice. You seem to have been in this medical space as a medical doctor for about 16 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I just saw that and I said, wow, it's very exciting. And I'd love to know as well from you as to what happened to you when you when you decided to move on and said, you know what, I think I'm more than just this person that people see me as just a medical doctor. And I think there's something much more that I can do. I would like us to maybe look at that as well. But I think first of all, I just want to hear from you, as a medical doctor, what really inspired you to get into medicine? When you said to yourself, now I want to do medicine, what really influenced that decision to get to that?
Well, it's so interesting, Veli, because I think the two questions are quite closely interlinked, actually. Yeah. What inspired me to get into medicine and what, or the decision I made to do medicine and the decision that I made to leave medicine and move into a different space. I don't think you ever really leave medicine. Like as they say, it's like plumbing, you never forget, and you are always called upon. But so in terms of the decision to move to start a medical training career, it actually was, I think it was one of the early indicators of what a powerful role intuition plays in my life. And I actually did not want to do medicine. It was one of the things that I didn't want to do. So I'm not one of the people that decided when they were 6, this is what I really, really, really want to do. But I did love people, and I've always loved working with people. I really enjoy children in particular. And interestingly enough, I took a year off after school, and during that year, I consulted with someone who really gave me input around the fact that he felt that medicine was going to be the best avenue for me, and I resisted. So we were talking a little bit earlier on about the need for autonomy. And what changed my mind, I had an interview. I was going to do occupational therapy. I wanted to work with people. I wanted to work in a health-based kind of profession or a teaching profession. I wanted to work with human thriving. and human development. But I didn't necessarily at that time want to do medicine. And I had my occupational therapy interview, and I was away from Johannesburg at the time. I had to fly back up. And the night, not the night, but about 3 nights before the interview, I had the most unbelievably powerful dream that I had to do. I must actually shift my application to medicine, which seems impossible at the time. And so I called them and I asked if I could change, and they said okay. But when I walked into the interview, they said, "Are you here to interview for occupational therapy?" And I said, "I would really like to change and interview for medicine." And in the interview was the head of the medical faculty, and amazingly they said, "Okay, fine."
Wow.
And so I got into medicine, loved my medical practice. I did not leave medicine because I didn't love medicine. I loved my practice. I loved the work that I did. I ran a family practice which is multi-generational, which is part of what I so loved. You could see the great-grandmother in the morning and you could see the new great-granddaughter in the afternoon.
Wow.
And it was really very special. A lot of pediatric practice, a lot of psychotherapeutic work, a lot of work in HIV and TB at the time. It was at the height of the pandemic. And I really did love that time. And then it came to a point where it needed to be something more. So.
Wow, I just love that. So it's something that it happened, but you had a very strong intuition, around it as well, to say, this is something that I want to do. And now you're growing up. I mean, do you remember when you were about, 12, when you were about 8, when you were about 15? What was happening in your world? What were you experiencing? How was your upbringing and growing up like to you?
So it's quite interesting. I had an interview some time ago, and they were interviewing me to ask what it's like being a woman in South Africa, leading sets of work or leading an organization. And it really struck me at that time that I had a very unusual experience, because I don't have at all a sense that there is a disadvantage or there is a catch-up or there is anything to do around growing self-confidence in terms of gender. And that's because I had an incredibly strong mother, and the partnership between my parents was highly equitable. Wow. And in fact, thinking about sort of transgenerationality, as my life has progressed, I've really been able to look back and see how I am not a product of my life. I'm actually a product of multiple generations that have come before me. And so growing up, I had a mom who was incredibly able to transition between different worlds. So she was a physiotherapist. She did social work. She was an incredibly humanistic person, and she wound up selling skid steer loaders for 20 years of her life, because my dad had a company that was in earth moving machinery and it needed support, and she joined him and she worked in a man's world, and she was incredibly successful. But there was also an element that wasn't necessarily, her passion. And I think what that experience gave me was an understanding that actually I can do anything, but I need to be very conscious about what I choose to do.
Yes.
So growing up, I was really privileged to grow up in a home that was incredibly stable and very loving, but with very busy parents. I had 4 siblings, and I always had something of this weird balance between thinking about things, but then dreaming about things as well.
Yes.
And practicing following my dreams, I think. So that was good.
So there was a lot of influence, from your parents as well, when you saw them being so busy and being so hands-on, and how they were actually carrying, on with life. They were doing things. So would you say that influenced the person that you became in terms of self-confidence? Because you have it, that self-confidence is something that shines through. I remember the first time we met, you can tell that, wow, Robyn, there's a lot of confidence there. So it's something that you experience as a child. I mean, like growing up, looking at your parents, not being grumpy, because sometimes when you've got people that are grumpy around you, it ends up affecting you as well as a person. So would you say your parents had a huge impact on the person that somehow you also became?
I think one's parents do have an enormous impact on one way or the other, always.
Yeah.
I think part of the process of growing up is unpacking what that influence has been, is in understanding others, understanding where they have come from, understanding how things that you just experience as a child, what the backstory to that is, understanding the backstory to your own parents' lives. And that's part of I really do believe that is also part of our work. And I don't like to think about, so specifically, your interest is in leadership. I don't like to think about leadership as being how we lead other people or about leading an organization. I really think that every single one of us has this capacity. Leadership is about growing up and about integrating, and it's about learning yourself.
Yes.
And it's about learning what your core being is and how you unmask that, and a lot of that unmasking work, how you bring what is your deepest intention, your deepest purpose for being, what matters most for you, how you become less guarded about that, and how you become more willing to show it and to bring it. And that work requires an enormous amount of interiority, and personally I don't believe that the interiority rests with you and your life alone. There is an additional piece to it. It's about understanding how you got here and what it is that's brought you here, and what influences have culminated in this your one life.
And you mentioned something, about growing up, especially as a leader. What does that really mean? Maybe if you can just unpack that a bit, to say as a leader you need to grow up because it's not about you. So did you mean in terms of understanding other people as well, and understanding that you've got to be serving, as a leader? I just want to get that context of, growing up, as a leader. What context are you, looking at it? I mean, like looking, at growing up from?
I think it's the willingness to do your own work, and it's the willingness to let the world touch you and influence the work that you need to be doing, and it's the letting go of the assumption that you can really change anybody else. The only thing we can do is influence other people's willingness and desire to grow. And so this balance between, I'm really careful about the word of service. So I'm an Enneagram 2, so service is a trap for me, because service can be a self-abdication as well. To pour yourself out in service, but actually neglect to do your own work, and neglect to recognize that there's a lot of positive reward that happens. So one needs to learn oneself. Like, what are the things that come naturally to you? What is the highest function, and what is your shadow side that actually that aspect can easily flip to something that's not really genuine, but it's reinforcing behaviors that keep you ungrown up.
Absolutely.
But yes, I think on the question of service, it's to really understand that to host space for other people to thrive, to become their own best selves, that's a huge act of service. And sometimes you do that by doing your own journey yourself and being vulnerable about what that means to you. And it's growing up is not only building things and making them stronger. It's sometimes recognizing where you are broken, or recognizing that this is not my core strength.
Yes.
I need to gather around myself those who complement what I'm not great at, and to not let the fact that you're not great at something break you or make you feel less adequate, but to see that this is part of myself. And it gives me an opportunity to actually be in relationship with others.
Absolutely. I love that. And also understanding that what is best for you may not be best for others. And I think that is very key, because sometimes it's easy for people to start, forcing, their views on other people, with that understanding that it worked for them. But I mean, that's one thing that came out from neuroscience. Actually, it's one of the neuroscience's latest discoveries, that as a person, personality doesn't scale, but biology does. So it means as a person, you cannot be, it has been shown, through identical twins, studies that have been done or conducted, that no two people are exactly the same. But at a biological level, you can increase those chemicals where you can get into a state of flow. So what gets you into a state of flow does not necessarily get me into the state of flow. So it's about finding out about myself to say, what is it that pushes me into that space? So I think leadership as well gets into understanding that. But also I just want to find out, I think, wrapping up this part of, being a medical doctor, because you still are, but I want to find out, what can you just paint for someone a typical day? If you say your day was great as a doctor, if you say maybe your day wasn't so great, maybe just can you paint a picture around that?
I can really only paint a picture of one of my typical days.
Yes,
because it's highly variable.
Absolutely,
it really does depend on where you are, what your practice is, what branch of medical practice you sit in. They can be. It's very variable. But for me, I was a family practitioner.
Yes.
I was in a practice with others, and it was at a point in my life where my family was young, and so I generally worked half to 3/4 days, and there was something really fantastic. So the thing with medical practice is that it is one of those professions. It is one of those professions where what is in front of you now is what needs your focus and attention, and the more present you are for what is sitting in front of you, or not what, the individual, the issue, the construct around what the person is presenting to you now, the more present you are in that, in the moment, the better you are likely to be able to get to the root of whatever is happening in that room. And I'm quite explicit about that, because often what somebody comes in to talk to you about is not necessarily not necessarily everything that is there. And so I'm going to segue a little bit, because it is an interesting, for me it was a very interesting experience. My medical practice was not so much a technical practice as it was a deeply relational practice.
Wow, I love that.
So there's a lot of, the medical space, what's quite rewarding in many regards is it is in many instances quite technical. So if you're a good diagnostician, the technicality is to look at the puzzle, look at the pieces that are here, look at the human being, and then be able to fit things together in order to get to a tentative or progressively more likely diagnosis, and to get to the crux.
Yes.
And we spoke a little bit earlier on about intuition, and for me this remains. So when I say I still regard myself as playing a therapeutic role, a role that supports healing, because it's about being able to listen in to what are the pain points, what is happening here, what are all of the pieces that are present, and then sense your way. So it's a really interesting integration of the intellectual kind of what you've learned, what you know, and this other piece, which I feel, and I think for the best doctors is generally the case. It's not just a science. It is definitely also, there's an element of art.
Yes.
There's an element, I battle to understand. There's certain countries where you will never have a person touch you when you go to see them. So they're your medical practitioner, but they will diagnose you like this. That's incomplete information. There is so much that you learn through engaging with all of the information around what a person is experiencing. And it doesn't only happen up here. There's an enormous sense of embodied understanding that comes. The number of times I would find a melanoma on somebody who came with a cold,
Yes.
because I just had this feeling there's something else that I must look for. Oh, let's just have a look. So for me, a typical day would be, it was a normal family practice. That practice for me was around people coming to me in my office, for me to see them, for me to run, to engage with them, and for us together to discover what was happening. I did do some. I also used to do. I quite enjoy surgery, so it's quite nice and simple. So it's quite nice to have a problem where you sew it up and then it is fixed for you. And I used to assist in theatre quite a lot. I used to do we were one of the last practices that did calls. So we used to go out to see patients. I did quite a lot of work into retirement homes, into care homes, etc. And then I did work on the side that was in addition to that, which was to do with I ran quite a big HIV, predominantly HIV related practice, and I used to run therapy group works with a close friend of mine, and that was really interesting as well. Looking at, we did a lot of constellation work. So again, looking at, it is not only this individual with a disease, it is a cluster of interrelating dynamics that's at play that deeply influence this person's experience, their emotional experience, what support they have, how likely they are to actually get better or not get better, or remain on their medication or go off their medication, or so that was all very interesting. But the one thing about, for me, medical practice that became the constraining factor was it just felt incredibly limited to this room, one by one, over and over.
And I think that actually joins to the next question, that I asked earlier, to say, when did you start to feel that, man, I think I'm limited, I think I need to fly now, where I am, I seem to be very much constrained, and there's this part of autonomy, that kicked in, where you said, I need to fly now. What signs did you have? I mean, did you start to have many voices and frustrations, or what happened then? Maybe if we just explain.
No, it's fantastic. It's a really interesting thing to talk about, really, because I talk to a lot of people about it, and I get very, very excited when people tell me I'm feeling edgy, scratchy, uncomfortable, unhappy. I don't know what it is. I actually get extremely excited when people start talking like that, because for me, you are on the cusp of a step of courage. This is an incredibly powerful moment that you can either deny, suppress, because, what am I? I'm going to lose my stability. I've trained so long. I've done this so much. I'm going to lose my salary. I'm going to lose, I have to. And that moment where the I have to starts to really bump up against, I cannot do this anymore, and there's no good reason. There's no good reason, because on the surface of it, this looks fantastic, but inside of me, something is shouting that there's change that's needed. That is such an exciting moment. And so I often talk to people who are experiencing that, about what that journey looks like. For me, it started about 4 years before I actually made my move. And it started just with this feeling of like, really? Like, really? Another 40 years? I love this, and it was really difficult because I love the engagement with I love the engagement with people.
Yes.
So in the moment, it was amazing, but driving home in my car or sitting in between, I'm like, what else? And I initially I had lots of other things I was doing also. But it got stronger and stronger, and I remember driving home late one night. I'd been to a pharmaceutical presentation, and I put the radio on, and in the car there was somebody doing an interview on life changes and the journey of life changes, and I will never forget it, because he said the only thing you know at first is that you're not happy where you are, and it's a very, very uncomfortable feeling, and it can't be rationalized away, and it's not to do with whether anything externally is necessarily making you unhappy. It's something that's coming from inside of you. So there's no blame associated with it. It's like I've outgrown this. And he said it's a 2-year process. It's a 2-year process, and it's a lot like a pregnancy. So, excuse me, you won't know, but you know, basically all you know for the first trimester is you just feel terrible. You just feel awful. And that's why, you know, I do see it as one of the things that I can offer is to listen to when people are saying, I just feel awful, and to say that is a very good feeling. Stay with it. Stay with it. And what he said was, you know, that the work of that period is to really go inwards and start to understand what is it. And for me, it's the work of finding what I call your near, the deepest intention of your being, and it's a work of integrity, like, but why am I not feeling comfortable?
Yes.
But what is it? And as you start to understand why you are feeling not settled, not comfortable, you edgy, you want to move, you also, on the other side, start to understand, oh, but these are the things that matter to me. Yes. Oh, I'm feeling uncomfortable because there's this aspect of my personality, or this aspect of what I feel I have to bring into the world that is not finding rooting ground here.
Yeah.
And the longer you do that, the more you tune into what is my inherent self. And when you've tuned into that piece, that's when you so that second trimester kicks in. You now start to see like the little bump. Okay. You start to feel kicks. You start to feel like, okay, I could imagine this as an option.
Yeah.
And you start to imagine like what would feel good. Then what starts to happen is you start to dream into the next future. You start to envision like, what could this look like? Where could I go? What could I be? What is it that's calling me that I want? And then moving into that final phase, you know, the almost getting ready to transition. Yeah. Really feeling this birthing of this new imminent. And I'll never forget, so when I got to that point in this journey, because there were a whole lot of things that happened, and I actually what happened was I did a lot of work with my children's school. They were at a government, Quintile 5 government school, and I was sat on their school governing body for a decade, and towards the end, so this was a 4-year period, in about year 3.5, the governing body foundation asked me to read the National Development Plan, the draft chapter on HIV and TB, because they needed somebody who understood schools, which I did very well by that point, understood the Department of Education's kind of approach, which I did partially at that point, and who really understood HIV and TB intimately, which I did because that was a big part of my practice. And when I read that, that was the breaking of the water for me, because I read that draft chapter and literally I put it down. I said, this is what I am meant. This is what I am here to do. And there was a moment where it was this return to self. So I had this visceral experience of, I feel like I'm 16 again. And I have this very clear vision of what's possible. But it's converted from being idealistic to actually being a visionary sense of, this is what's calling me. And I put it down. I wrote myself a business plan. I phoned my oldest sister, because there's something about saying it, like articulating, this is what I'm going to do. And then you had to go through the birth process. So then there is the partition, like leaving behind, which is very hard. Now going back to that service, that for me was incredibly hard, because my personality, I don't want to let people down. If I've said to you, I will do something, then I will do it. If I have a sense that I am in service to you, so now I have 1,000, 2,000 patients, I wrote to every single one of them. Sure. Every person, it took about 6 months for me to actually say, okay, I am going to make this move, and to leave well. There was a huge amount of intuitive work that was happening at that time as well. But in any case, there is then a birthing moment, and for me that, so just tying it back, tracking. So this was what he spoke about in this interview, and this was my lived experience. That I knew the move. I knew exactly what move I wanted to make. I knew even where I wanted to go and make it, but it wasn't yet quite time. Yes. And although I'd articulated it, my husband kept asking me at the time, so you've said you want to do this, when are you going to do it? I said, I don't know, because it's not exactly right yet. And I had some health issues at the time that also slowed things down a little bit. And I knew it was the right moment. I took my son and daughter down to Ushaka Marine World. My daughter loved dolphins, so I think it was her 6th birthday. I just packed them in the car and I drove them down so that we could go and see the dolphins. And while we were there, my son, who was about 12 at the time, wanted to go on into the water park. And he went on all the slides, and he looked at the biggest one. He said, I'm too scared, I can't do it. So I said, I'll do it. Watch, let's do it together. And the moment that so we went up, and the moment that I stepped off that slide, I thought, I'm ready. I'm ready, because this is the experience I'm going to have, and I'm now ready. And it's literally like, because when you stand there, you can't see. So you can't see over the edge, you literally have to step off and go. Absolutely. And you have to trust. And that was the moment that I said, great, I'm ready. And I made the move into this new phase. So long story short, this is not a once-off decision. No. It's a process decision. And people often say, you were so brave to do that. And I'm like, not really. I was completely compelled to do it, because there comes a point where it's not brave to do something that actually, in order to stay where you are, you're going to have to cut yourself off from who you actually are. Yeah. But at the same time, I do think there is an element of courage in it. The element of courage doesn't come in making the move. The element of courage comes in saying, I'm going to listen to what my own soul is telling me, yes. and I'm going to explore it.
And I just love that, because you know how you've articulated that. Because when you talk about having belief, believing in yourself and trusting yourself, there's that part when you trust yourself to say, whatever happens, I'll embrace it. Like when you feel that it's not just being brave for me to do it, but we felt compelled that it was about time that I do it. So that's something. And when we talk about you feeling a sense of discomfort about something, to say, I think now I'm not here, you need to be honest with yourself and say, this is what I'm feeling. Instead of suppressing that, because that's what we tend to do. And I think, I'm sure maybe you can attest to that, to say there are a lot of frustrations that we experience in our lives. And there are so many, not just discomforts, when you feel that you are unhappy in your life because you failed to embrace certain things, you justify for them. To say, no, I cannot be feeling this way because how am I going to deal with that? How am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to do that? And yet, that sense of discomfort stays with you because the truth is there. Someone once said, I think it was Winston Churchill. He said that the truth is incontrovertible. Malice may attack it and ignorance may deride it. But at the end, the truth is there. Looking at you. You can try to cover it and make fun of it, but the truth will just remain the truth. So at the end of the day, when people start saying, wow, you were so grave, I wish I were like you, but you had to go through these different stages, which you eloquently, I think, illustrated by looking at, like pregnancy. Yes, I'm just imagining it, but I can only imagine it. Yes, going through that. But I really love it because I'm going to talk about the first trimester where you are very, you are awful. So those are the kinds of things you are feeling uncomfortable because this is something that is new that you need to try to embrace, but it's difficult to embrace it. And I can imagine that it goes the same, when it comes to leaders as well. When you are leading in a particular way, you understand what needs to be done, but the culture of the workplace does not allow you. It wants you to be pushy. It wants you to be disrespectful. It wants you to be inhuman. Would you say it's something similar?
Absolutely. And I think this is the thing. So I'm really interested in the personal journey, but I'm very interested in the collective journey because I think that's where we have an enormous amount of work to do. And it's not either or. There is so much internal personal work to do. And it's a kind of one of the fundamental principles of that slightly getting overused Ubuntu word, but it's not first this and then that.
Yes.
It's not you can do that without doing this. We have to do them in parallel. And so we've spent so much of the leadership conversation has been around doing your internal work so that you can maybe influence others. But there is a piece there around we need to do our internal work, and then for me the greatest role that and I don't actually love the term leadership because I think it's got a very specific construct. For this item of how collectively do we step into our highest future potential, that for me, I've coined a new word for it, which is weavership. It comes from a lot of the learning that I've done, and it's not the same leadership. We have a particular mental construct around a single person with followers, or even if it's a group of people with followers. There are certain things that we know that tend to motivate that leadership space. It's often, there's external motivations that invite people to step into the leadership sort of space.
Yes.
This aspect of hosting the space for us collectively to start to step into our own highest integrity, into our own highest potential, and to start to not operate in this control over, but to start to really activate the collective will towards creating something together too. That the weavership element, it has some fundamental differences. So for people to be willing to host that space, often they have to be willing to not have the name of the person making it happen.
Yes.
They often are the people who are not highly visible. They don't want to be gurufied. They don't want to be the most visible person because they are not interested in the outcome. They are interested in creating the right kinds of conditions. And that level of service is not around what I can do to make your life easier. It's around how do I create an environment that invites you and supports you to do your own work, to step into your own integrity,
Yes.
To grow your own highest potential. And it also recognizes that very often, not sometimes, very often, that's going to take you on a different path from my one, and I'm going to be okay with that. So, if we think about it, I've done quite a lot of work with different organizations that have been going through transitional phases, and I will often say at the beginning, if we're really going to invite the work of integrity into this space, understand upfront that what that might mean is the more people find what really matters to them, a number of people will find what really matters to them, and it's not going to be in this organization. And so the act of holding that space for people to find their own highest meaning, potential, what it is that they have to bring into the world, might be an act where you lose team members, but actually that is going to feel like this catastrophe at the time. But the truth is that it's going to be better for your organization, and it's going to be much better for that individual, and it's going to be better for collectively what is brought into the world, rather than trying to kind of do that more. So sometimes I feel a lot of what is encouraged in the leadership role is to make sure people stay, to make sure the environment is right for them to stay. To step beyond that, to be able to liberate, it's fairly rare, but it's also incredibly generative. It's where we release energy, like energy is released, and I've seen it happen. I always say, I say as well, generally it's a 3-year process. It's going to be the first trimester, it's going to be horrendous, it's going to be terrible. And then you'll start to feel, and then something new will birth that you couldn't have got to unless you went through this process. Yes. But don't make the mistake of thinking it's all going to be marvelous. It's actually going to be really difficult. So whether that's a personal journey or a collective journey, the willingness to step into the difficult, this is not going to feel great. And I will still do it because I can't stay where I am anymore. And I think that's the moment of courage doesn't come at when the big change happens. The moment of courage comes at, am I willing to look at what I'm really thinking, feeling? Am I, for a collective, for an organization, am I willing to look at what's really being experienced, what this group of people is feeling? And a lot of that transition, I think, is to transition away from fear and control based systems which want to keep and make things happen,
Yes.
to love based systems which want to liberate and release potential.
And you've just mentioned 2 things, and I just love them. I think the other one, to sacrifice for something. There's an African proverb, a beautiful one, I love it. It says, if you're not willing to sacrifice for what you want, what you want becomes a sacrifice.
Yeah.
So I think it comes back to that issue that when you are compelled to listen to that voice within you, that enslaves you in some way. You become a prisoner, of your own voice that tells you the truth, because now you are like, you are between the 2 worlds. You don't know whether it's this one that I need to follow or that one, But at some point you need to make a decision. And the other one you spoke about, when you are that person, you're talking about preferring weavership over leadership, because I mean, like, you are growing together, you are doing this thing together. And I think growth itself presents different challenges. And I always liken this growth as climbing up the mountain. When you ascend the mountain, you start to see different views at different levels of the mountain. And when you are a bit higher, like you are midway this mountain, you start to see views that you were blinded to.
Yep.
And yet, that's part of growth.
Yeah.
Then you start to realize that actually I'm better off elsewhere, not where where I am. You know, this path that I'm on, I'm not going to be able to, it's not going to lead me to that particular thing that I want to achieve. Then you start shifting.
Yeah.
And people say now, but I mean, we were growing you in this. You say, no, but I grew up in this, but I saw at a certain level that it's not where I am meant to be. I'm better off over there, not here. Then you start blaming them, say, we rather not grow people, because when you grow them, then they fly away.
Yeah.
And I think it comes back to the issue, that example that we were using, which I just loved it, you know. And when it comes to, I think earlier we touched on leadership deficit, you know, that we have. There are many challenges where leaders are not stepping up because of many different reasons. Some of them may not be prepared. Some of them may have been promoted because of their technical prowess. But in terms of being in touch with people, that is a challenge. What have you experienced? What do you think is why don't we have really effective leaders? I mean, leaders that, because there are some people that I get to ask and I say, but when you wake up in the morning, or even before waking up, when you think about going to work tomorrow, what happens to you? And people say, oh my goodness, I just feel like, how do you feel on Sunday evenings? You know, I think that's a real time. You know, when do you really feel on Sunday evenings when you think about Mondays?
Yeah.
And people start feeling awful. And one of the, I think there's one of the researchers, it came up with this statistic that they found that they were higher, the number was the highest on Sunday evenings in terms of, you know, heart attacks. You know, when they followed that one up and they realized that it was because of the anxiety that was building up, you know, when it came to people thinking about Mondays. But it's not about thinking about walls and the roofs and the computers. It's about people in the workplace. So as a leader, for you to be effective, and I think you've touched on certain things there, what picture of this effective leader do you have? You know, if you were to create an avatar, you know, of a person that we say, this avatar, it represents someone who is an effective leader. In your world, what does an effective leader look like? in terms of, you know, in terms of characteristics, in terms of qualities, in terms of someone that, you know, that makes you look forward to go and approach them, that you feel comfortable to be around them. So what kind of a person is that? You know, what do you think of, and what have you seen? What have you experienced yourself, you know, as someone who's a global citizen? I mean, you're at conferences, you help organizations, you've heard people speak as well in terms of the leaders that they, you know, that they would prefer, or leaders that bring out the best in them. So for you, what is it? What sort of a picture that you have?
So I'm going to just tell you what's like really coming up.
Yes, please.
So the first thing is they don't call themselves leaders. So there's something about people who are able to evoke the highest potential in other people, know themselves, so they're not self-abnegating.
Yes.
But they don't need to self-promote either.
Yes.
And I think that, you know, this is part of the so this is part of the challenge where we've conflated roles with how people behave. And so because I have a title of leader, I therefore am a leader. It's why I think so. Language is, I'm really interested in language, and I try to be quite careful with how I use language, and it's part of when we have words that we assume everybody has the same understanding of their meaning. it becomes very difficult to unpack, like, but why are people so at odds around behaviors that are, you know, what we think are part of the meaning of this word. And there's an element to which we kind of try to unpack the leadership discussion by using adjectives. So we talk about servant leadership, distributed leadership, you know, all of these, but fundamentally at the core there remains this leadership concept, which remains, however you want to overcome it, hierarchical. There remains an enormous amount of power associated with it. And so, you know, when we talk about having amazing leaders, they are not people who deny that they're leaders, but they also don't need the role to do they don't do the work, they don't do what they do because they have a role.
No.
It's, if anything, it's inverted, and there are many people who never get a formal role, who never formally get called a leader, but whose influence upon people's lives and upon how things move and upon bringing positive influence into the world and upon making things happen is profound. And so there's something fundamental there around the choice of how do I want to be in the world, which is, it's really core, and it goes to really finding out what matters to me most and how do I live into integrity in that. And if I do that, then I bring the best that I am into the world. And it might not be at a... So for myself, I would not call myself a leader, because yes, there's a technical role here or there, but I know that the way that things move through me are generally third degree. So I am a connector. I can make certain things happen, but mostly the things that emerge into the world are because of seeing a connection and seeing another connection and being able to facilitate people or pieces of work or things that belong together to find each other. I don't need to be involved in them. And so, but once they've found each other, something incredible happens. And that's not what kind of in our organizational terminology would be talked about as yes. leadership. But there is an aspect but for noticing, but for being willing to actually say, I see this in you, I see this over here, there's potential. Let's see what happens if we connect them.
Yes.
Something beautiful might not be born. So I would classify myself as a weaver, because
Yeah, but that's the thing. I mean, it's about being, authentic. It's about being yourself, because that's what you think of someone who becomes effective as a weaver or as a leader, but someone who becomes effective in what they do when they are given the role to, just to create that platform, for people to thrive, because it's about that. It's about thriving. So how do leaders, effective leaders, create that environment? Because one of the things is like encouraging creative thinking. Because we're living in a world where there are two things that are created. It's either you create thinkers out of people, or you create order takers.
Yeah.
Which is something that we get to see a lot because of these egos.
Yeah.
That we talk about, to say it's about me. Like narcissism ends up taking over because, you want people to see that you're in charge. You want people you're quick to remind them. But at the end of the day, as an effective leader, you want to create an environment where people can be able to think.
Yeah.
Because
exactly.
if you are having people around you who cannot think, who depend or rely on you as a person, then you did not create, people who are able to carry on, the movement. So as it were. So you need to be able to create people that are going to be able to take over from you and take the journey further. I mean, it's like a relay, that we're talking about. So that's the thing. I mean, I think when it comes to leadership, when it comes to people not stepping up, because it becomes about them, not creating a platform.
Exactly, not hosting the conditions for others to grow into their fullest potential. So there's this beautiful concept of time and of how we perceive time, and so you spoke about the polarity work, and I think it's not about choosing either or. It's actually about the work of integrating that there are ways of being in the world that are both necessary, but that somehow I think in the way we consider how things happen, what makes things happen, how things move, what a leader is, what effectiveness is, it's been incredibly weighted on the one aspect of what we need to move things in the world. And so the sort of differentiation of these concepts of time are that you have Chronos time. So Chronos time, which is the clock, the productivity, the getting things done, the making things happen. It's tangible, it's visible, it's you can plot it, you can plan it, you can kind of work into it. And then you have this other aspect of time and how time works and how things move and what happens. And that's Kairos time. Okay, so Kairos time is the time that it takes for things to grow. Emergence.
Yes.
Tuning into what is possible and what is moving through, and what are those things that we can grow into that we can't quite yet see, and therefore we can't actually plan for them yet. And so the other way I like to think about that is it's really the difference between mechanical planning and agrarian planning.
Yes.
That, mechanical planning, you can build a machine, you can put the parts in. If it's not working, you can go in and take the part out and replace it, and you can optimize its function, but it is mechanical.
Yes.
If you want to grow something, you need to plant it, and then you need to nurture it. Before you plant it, you need to make sure that the conditions into which you plant it
So that's an agrarian approach.
Exactly. Yes. And when it is planted, there's going to be a long period of time where you can't see if it's going to be successful or not. You need to operate in trust and keep the conditions right. The worst thing that you can do is to go and dig the plant up and see has it sprouted yet. And so I think going back to this concept, Chronos time is what you manage. You manage things. Kairos time, this agrarian piece, vision setting, inviting people along, growing people. And I think that in the way that we have been, and this is not a personal problem, it's not a South African societal problem, it's actually a modernity issue.
Yes.
The way that for 500 years we have habituated ourselves to think about how do you get stuff done, is we've got this huge weighting on the mechanistic, plan it out, visualize it, and then put into place the things that are going to make it happen, and then do that work, and if it's not working, quickly go in, remove something and fix it.
Which is what is called productivity.
And it's productivity, it's outputs, it's outcomes, it's short-termism, it's getting to your 6-month goal, it's getting to your annual profit payout. But we are, because of this hyper-focus on that aspect, we have severely under-focused on this other aspect, which is patient. And it's open, and it's generative, and it's emergent. And it requires a real capacity to remain at peace, even when something takes a while to manifest. And those kinds of leaders are there. They are there. People love them. Okay. People love them, but we haven't culturally developed this narrative around And that is a specific attitude. It's a specific willingness to remain in something, to grow something, not just to get to the product.
I'm just thinking, would you maybe not just blame it maybe to our focus on being capitalistic? Because it focuses on the bottom line. It doesn't look at this, when you look at this agrarian approach, to things, it tends to look more on the mechanistic way of doing things. We want this thing now, here and now. They want to make money now and whatever. So would you say that has a lot of influence maybe to how we tend to focus on the qualities of leaders that we tend to choose or to have?
So definitely, so that kind of, but it's not, so there's an easy propensity to kind of call capitalism evil. Capitalism, that kind of, what do I put in and what do I get out, and what I'm really focused on is what I get out, or what this organization gets out. It's almost a symptom of the way we think. So it's a symptom of, so Vanessa Andreotti has this beautiful, beautiful book called Hospicing Modernity, and it's really interesting.
Hospicing
Modernity.
Yes. Okay.
And it's really interesting because it's almost in this past 6 weeks with everything that's happening at a geopolitical level, it's almost being able to unmask and visibly see this is the consequence of the way we have habituated ourselves to thinking. It's become shallower and shallower, and it's become more and more self-serving, and it's become more and more about what do I get out, and it's become really limited in terms of its thinking about whole, the whole, that what is the implications for the whole, and the whole, I might not see it in my lifetime. So I've been super conscious, in this work around how do we collaborate more effectively. There've been people doing work around this for forever, because it's a fundamental kind of human question. But certainly, around our local South African landscape, for instance, and specifically I work a lot in education, there've been people thinking and doing work on this for 80 years plus. And speaking to a lot of the generation that's gone before, there's this real sense of, we worked so hard at this.
Yeah.
It just hasn't taken. I feel that we haven't got there. And from my perspective, I feel that it's not the work of one generation.
Yeah.
This is the work of us collectively as humanity. It's actually very spiritual work, and to hope that I am going to make it happen, or it's going to happen in this period of time because of these 4 interventions we've put in, rather than appreciating that this is about growing up as a collective humanity. And the thing about growing up is you don't have to do it. I mean, that we're not talking about the biological process. And so that choice to whether collectively we decide to go into that difficult growth curve, knowing that it's probably going to get harder before we start seeing actually what's possible, or removing ourselves from that and blocking it out because it's going to be uncomfortable, is really the choice. I do a lot of work with the Theory U model, but it's really the choice. It's a moment of choice. It's the moment of courage to say, I'm going to choose to presence myself, to become more open, to become more vulnerable, to become less certain, to become less inclined to want to make and control a certain outcome. I'm willing to go there. Or, this is too frightening, I'm going to absence myself. I'm going to retreat into more certainty, more control, more power, more making things happen, more managerial skills. And we can literally see this playing out at a geopolitical level right this moment. It's a moment of unmasking, and again, where we choose to focus our attention, there is an individual element to that, and our individual choice can become what gives hope to other people or doesn't give hope to other people.
Yeah.
There is so much push to focus on the absencing. So the more we focus on, look what's happening, it's terrible, it's scary, it's awful, it is. But if we put all of our focus there and we don't come back to that line of choice about, and me, in this, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Am I going to respond to the fear and, sell all my stocks in things that don't look promising and try and put them in something that is, so that I can make more money? Or am I going to presence myself and say, this is hard, and I'm going to remain in integrity even when it's hard? That is a personal choice, but increasingly it can also become a collective choice, and there are many, many people who are choosing the presencing route. It's a huge movement that's underway.
Wow.
And there is a lot of hope. But there is also a shadow side that puts that into highlight. And this choice becomes, okay, so where am I going to focus now?
Yes. Wow. I love that. And I know that time is not always on our side. I just want to check maybe with you. What is your take on this work-life balance? As it were, because you hear a lot of people who advocate for that. No, they must have work-life balance. But what's your understanding of this work-life balance concept?
Depends who you talk to in my family. Yeah. For me, it's a life balance. So
life balance.
When work is a management, chronos, fear-based, control-based, mental model. These are the things I have to do because I have to do them.
Yes.
Because, if we can start to live into integrity, it becomes, these are the things that I do. And yes, there's the aspect of time and how I manage my time, and yes, there are all of these things, and yes, they are maybe sometimes uncomfortable, but for me there's often a piece of information. So if I am feeling my work-life balance going off, it's information. Okay, so it's not that I'm feeling my work-life balance going off, it's that I'm fallen out of integrity.
Yes.
There's something, and the thing to do in that moment is not to push harder, it's to pause and self-reflect and think. And one of the there's a very powerful model around creating thinking space and thinking environment, and it's very, very helpful to have partners in your life that are really good thinking partners that will allow you to think into their holding space. It's quite rare, but it's very powerful. And often when you are having that experience of, again, like something feels off here, the opportunity to step into a thinking partnership with somebody who will really allow you to think through that feeling to get to what is the nugget around why I feel out of integrity with what matters most to me, can unlock that feeling of I'm off balance. So maybe just one last thing, because I actually, that question around what are the things that allow us to lead well, to hold space for others' growth well, to hold the space for us to be in collective growth together. There are lots of technical things that one can do. I mean, there's lots of learning, there's lots of growth that one can do, but for me it really comes down to two core fundamental things that we can do that will help us continue on that journey, because it's also not today I wasn't, and tomorrow I am. It's this progressive growing up. We grow up until we, until we have no capacity to grow anymore because we die.
Yes.
It's not, you're not grown up when you're 50. It's this continuous process. And the things that are within our power is to focus on ensuring your clarity of intent. So what, as I said, what I call Nia, or what is called Nia, it's an Arabic word, a Kiswahili word that means the highest intention of my being towards God, towards a higher purpose. So, and that is this process of self-knowledge. Who am I? What am I about? What matters to me? What do I care about? Where does my light shine? And how do I really evoke that within myself and become braver about showing it? And the other thing is the piece around how do I become more collective? And it's about the quality of my attention. So how do I practice paying attention? So internally, paying attention to myself, all of the sources of information that I have, not just this, my feelings, what's happening in my body, my intuition, all of the kind of information that actually helps me understand what's going on. And then the attention that is between. So how do I progressively practice paying higher quality, better attention to those around me? And that's, that's learnable skills, but the thing before you can learn it, you have to want to learn it. And the wanting to learn it is, how do I become that best possible part of myself?
And I love that, and maybe I'll just also weave that into maybe our second last question or so, to say, for someone, let's say maybe it's 25, and seeing what you've seen, with life, what did you say maybe are the few things that one can look at in order to be someone who's comfortable in their own skin, and for someone who is able to lead themselves well, so that they can be able to be great examples for others as well? What advice would you give to that person at 25-year-old? I mean, who is just growing up, is just chasing things and, wanting to be like other people and stuff like that. What advice would you give to that person? Something that can set them on a path of either self-discovery and of being in tune with themselves, and to be able to be that person that others can be able to find themselves comfortable to be around.
I think a couple of things, quite simple things. Listen to yourself. Okay,
Yes.
so listen to yourself and make time in your life to listen to yourself. Be honest with yourself. So even if you are only writing it down how you really feel, and even if you don't exactly know what it is, be honest with yourself. Be honest about your thoughts, your feelings, what's present for you. Be brave. Okay, so be brave.
Yes.
Practice saying what you mean, and practice saying it in a way that others can receive, and that you yourself can receive. And then commit to growth. So never, ever, ever, ever stop growing. You will never get to, if you get to a point where everything is comfortable and it's all just fine, that's great. Enjoy it. But when you start to feel that little edginess, follow it.
Yes.
Let yourself continue to grow. And the growth can come in lots of different ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be career growth only.
Yes.
The more you listen to yourself and what matters to you, the more you are likely to find where your growth path is taking you.
Yes. So that will mean running your own race at your own pace.
Yeah.
Somehow that's something that's very important. There's something maybe that I can just say at the end, towards that, to say the power of relationships. And I think that's something that you kept on mentioning that came through, our conversation, to say, try to have people, surround yourself with people that you can be able to go to, people that you can be able to reason and to unpack, how you feel about yourself, because there are certain things that we mostly run away from because we don't have the courage once again to confront them. But you need to have some people around you that will be able to, that will be comfortable in their spaces. And I think that's one thing that you said which resonated with me. And I think that's something that's very powerful. Now, just our second last question. If you were to be, you're looking at our country now, or even our world, if you were to be the president for a day, and you had this magic wand with you, what do you think are the three things that you look at and say, these things I would like to do and I'd like to change for this world to be a better place within your powers? Because you are that. And I know it's a tricky question, but I mean, based on what you see, what do you think is somehow missing? I think to sum up some of the things that you spoke about, to say, I think for me, these are the two things that maybe I would actually consider, doing for the world to be in a better place. Because, when you look at how things are going and how people have lost some morals, and things like that, there's a challenge that you are faced with. And to others, they see that as a good, I don't know, they tend to benefit from that. But how would you use your powers?
I feel like I landed back in grade 7 again.
Oh my goodness, I tell you, I just, you think of it now as saying, I think these two, for me, they will stand out.
Yeah. So, look, I'm going to go back to it, and I do want to acknowledge just your last point, because that would have been the other thing is for your 25-year-old, grow your spaces of trust. So be intentional about growing the connections that offer you space to think into, that become communities of care and belonging. They are rare spaces of trust. You need to be intentional about creating them. You can host them, you can create them, and the more you host them, the more they become available to you as spaces to think into. The president for a day question. So there's I would worry less about the functional things and far more about what culture am I building what culture do I commit to, and how do I show up like that? And it would be around really foregrounding, know yourself and be in integrity. Let us practice this honesty, knowing ourselves, being in integrity, and grow the sense of what is the collective highest potential. What do we want? What do we want together? And then not thinking that by just wanting it, it's going to happen.
Yes.
But having, growing that collective vision for what is it that we want. How do we want to be together? How do we want to experience this world? And then enhancing and increasing and creating these thinking spaces, these communities of care and belonging, being very intentional around how do I create the conditions that will help people to hold on to that sense of integrity to what it is and how we want to be together. How do I create the conditions that will help us hold that within the enormous amount of complexity that we have to deal with? I really do think there is no silver bullet, okay? There's no I can do 1, 2, 3.
Yes.
The best that I can do is become clear on where do we want to go, and then create the conditions that will help people stay brave, even when they're facing incredibly complicated decisions, issues, challenges, things that are really ugly, things that are really hard. How do we keep on moving? Because it's not about a flip over, if we just do these 3 things, it will be transformed. It's about how do we commit to the journey?
Yeah.
And to commit to the journey, I need to have not the perfect vision of where I'm going, but I need to have the call towards where I'm going.
Yes.
And then I need to remain brave enough to continue walking and you know what they say, if you find yourself in hell, please just don't stop there. Okay,
Absolutely.
So you know, how do we create environments and environments where people are safe enough to speak about how hard it is,
Yes.
and how afraid they are, and how anxious they are, and how much they want to give up, and how much they want to absence themselves and just apply a quick, fast solution and not take the blame for it? How do we hold people in the position where they will continue to presence themselves to the complexity that there is, hold on to the vision, and support each other to walk through?
Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Robyn Wittaker. You know what our final question is? Now we have reached the end of your life. We have to create we have to create a legacy for ourselves. And a legacy is not just something in buildings and in structures, in bricks and mortar, as it were. It's all about what we live in spirit, what we deposit in other people's memories, born and unborn. How would you like to be remembered as Dr. Robyn Wittaker when people were to hear about your life? What would you like them to remember most about your existence?
I don't need people to remember me as a human being, but I really feel that if there are spaces that people feel that they were inspired, grew their courage, stepped more fully into themselves, and especially that they felt loved, because I think love is what gives us courage, not certainty about an outcome. If people have, the legacy I would love to be able to leave is, even if it's just for a space, a collective of people, that I've contributed to this shift in the ways that we are being together, to normalizing that communities of care and belonging really, really matter. They really matter. They are the spaces that make us brave, give us courage, support us, help us, hold us, and let us choose to be our best selves. That would be an incredible legacy for me. And it doesn't need to be affiliated with a specific memory of person.
Wow. What do I say here? Thank you so very much. And ladies and gentlemen, to our viewers and to our listeners, when you talk about the neuroscience of effective leadership, I always talk about the effectiveness part of it. And there are two elements to it. There is leading others, and there's leading yourself. And this piece today was mostly and mainly about how do you grow yourself to be an effective person, because without you being an effective person, it's going to be very hard and difficult for you to be effective for other people and to them as well. So this is something that is exciting to say. When you grow yourself, when you surround yourself with those people who have strength and those people that can be able to encourage you to do what you need to do, that's something that's most important. And there's something that Dr. Wittaker mentioned here, the issue of something that resonated with me, where she said, when you go for what you want, and when you want to achieve, when you have clarity, it's not that you are certain that you're going to get it, that will move you forward, but it is the love of it that you have. When you are drawn into the future by the passion and the feeling of love for what you do, you're going to go places. Certainty does not guarantee that you're going to enjoy what you need to, that something that you are chasing and that you are after. So I think for me, it's been something that has been very great, and I really appreciate that. And Dr. Wittaker, I really appreciate your time. And thank you so very much just to come and just share with us what does it take to be an effective person, because at the end of the day, we cannot just be growing others, but it has to start with the journey of growing ourselves. Because if you don't understand what you want, if you don't understand what really matters to you, and you don't understand the phases that you go through as a person, when you have to be in touch with that feeling that you experience, then you're going to get lost, because you're going to you will try to bury the feeling that you have, that you're experiencing, because you try to justify for it, to say, no, I can't be feeling this way right now. No, this is not the right thing. But whenever there's a voice inside of you that talks to you about something that you need to achieve, you've got to listen to that voice. And by surrounding yourself with people that are going to help you grow that courage, it's something that's very important. So thank you very kindly.
Thank you,
it's
Billy.
been such a great pleasure to have you, and for you just to come through and just share your ideas, because at the end of the day, someone needed to hear this story. Someone wanted to hear this message that you shared with us today. And thank you so very much.
Thank you.
And we wish you everything of the best. When you talk about Africa Voices, these Africa Voices dialogues, and that's something, we need to have these dialogues, we need to have these voices, because what kind of dialogues do you have without voices?
Yeah.
We need exactly the voices so that we can have fruitful and effective dialogues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Billy.
Robyn,
Thank
it's
you
been
so
such a
much.
great pleasure.
You have just watched the latest episode of the Neuroengineering Podcast for Leaders with Velindaba, the neuroengineer, where we transform leaders from leadership darkness to leadership light. To engage us further on our services, keynotes, workshops, coaching, and merchandise, visit our website, velindaba.com. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this episode.